In the late 12th century, northern India believed it had seen this threat before. Foreign armies would come. They would raid, they would leave. This time, they did not. Welcome to a channel that explores history as a chain of decisions, pressures, and systems where empires are not born in moments of glory, but in quiet choices that refuse to reverse course. This story is not just about invasion, it is about permanence. About why northern India, for centuries resilient against outside conquest, did not return to what it had been, and why, after the Ghurids crossed the Indus, history stopped resetting itself. Because this is not the story of how the Delhi Sultanate was founded. It is the story of why it could not be unfounded. To understand the Ghurid conquests, we have to abandon the comforting assumption that medieval India was conquered because it was weak, divided, or technologically behind. That explanation is neat, and it is wrong. India had been politically fragmented before. It had faced foreign invasions before. Arab armies, Turkic raiders, Central Asian horsemen, none had managed to establish a durable, ruling state across the Indo-Gangetic plain. So the real question is not why the Ghurids arrived, it is why they stayed, and more importantly why the systems they introduced outlived them. Long before the first Ghurid banners appeared on the Indian frontier, the subcontinent sat at the intersection of enormous pressures. To the northwest lay Central Asia, harsh, mobile, and militarized, a region that produced soldiers faster than it produced food. Empires there did not expand for glory, they expanded because they had to. South of those mountains lay India, wealthy, fertile, urbanized, and politically plural. Its kingdoms rose and fell often, but its core structures endured. Local elites controlled land. Revenue was extracted through established hierarchies. Power changed hands, but administration remained recognizable. For centuries, this balance had absorbed shock after shock. The Ghaznavids had tested it first. Mahmud of Ghazni is often remembered as a conqueror, but his campaigns followed a familiar pattern. Seasonal raids, targeted strikes, extraction of wealth, then withdrawal. Ghazni never attempted to govern India deeply. It did not transplant institutions. It did not settle its military class permanently across the plains, and because of that, India reverted. By the mid-12th century, the Ghaznavid state itself was in decline. Crushed between rising powers to the west and rebellious territories to the east, it became brittle. Its frontier defenses weakened. Its authority faded. Into this vacuum stepped a lesser-known power from the mountains of central Afghanistan, the Ghurids. At first, they appeared insignificant. They did not control great cities. They lacked the polished courts of older dynasties. Their homeland was rugged, poor, and unforgiving, but this was not a disadvantage. It was preparation. The Ghurid state was forged in scarcity. It could not rely on inherited wealth or long-standing legitimacy. It relied instead on discipline, mobility, and delegation. Most importantly, it did not see India as a raid. It saw India as a solution. Under the leadership of brothers Ghiyav-al-Din Muhammad and Mu'izz al-Din Muhammad, often known as Muhammad of Ghur, the Ghurids began a systematic expansion. Ghiyath focused westward, consolidating power in Iran and Khorasan. Muhammad looked east. This division of labor mattered. It meant the Indian campaigns were not distractions. They were a dedicated theater of conquest. The first Ghurid advances followed familiar routes through the mountain passes into the Punjab. At first, nothing seemed different. Fortresses were taken, cities changed hands. Resistance was met and subdued. Indian rulers recognized the pattern. They expected withdrawal. Instead, the Ghurids reinforced. They installed governors. They left garrisons. They returned season after season, not to raid new targets, but to secure old ones. This was the first signal that something fundamental had changed. The real test came in 1191, at the plain of Tarain. Facing the Ghurids was Prithviraj Chauhan, ruler of Ajmer and Delhi, leading a confederation of Rajput forces. This was not a minor kingdom. It controlled strategic territory and commanded experienced armies. At the first Battle of Tarain, the Rajput forces prevailed. Muhammad of Ghur was wounded. His army retreated. By every precedent, this should have ended the invasion. Foreign commanders had lost before. They had gone home. Muhammad of Ghur did not. Instead, he returned the following year. This return is often described as revenge, but revenge is emotional. What happened next was structural. The Ghurids studied their failure. They adjusted tactics. They avoided frontal clashes with heavy cavalry. They used mounted archers to exhaust, isolate, and fracture their opponent. At the Second Battle of Tarain in 1192, the outcome reversed completely. The Rajput coalition collapsed. Prithviraj was captured and executed. But even this victory does not explain what followed. Conquest was not sealed at Tarain. It was merely made possible. The Ghurids did not declare victory and withdraw. They did not attempt to rule everything directly. Instead, they delegated commanders who were assigned territories. Trusted slaves, military professionals raised within the Ghurid system were given autonomy, responsibility, and incentive. This was not feudalism as India knew it, nor was it tribal loyalty. It was bureaucratic militarism. The most important of these commanders was Qutb al-Din Aibak. Aibak was not a prince. He had no dynastic claim. His authority came entirely from appointment and performance. From his base in Delhi, Aibak expanded Ghurid control across the Gangetic Plain, not through mass destruction, but through relentless pressure. Fortresses were isolated, not rushed. Alliances were exploited, local elites were absorbed or replaced. Crucially, the Ghurids did not attempt to dismantle India's revenue systems, they captured them. Land grants were reassigned, tax obligations were redirected, existing administrative personnel were retained where useful. This minimized disruption, and it ensured continuity. The conquests were not fast, they were methodical. Each new territory was not just defeated, it was connected, supplied, defended. The Ghurids understood something their predecessors had not. India could not be ruled like a raid zone, it had to be governed like a homeland. This required restraint. Temples were looted in some cases, but systematic cultural destruction was not the goal. The goal was revenue, stability, predictability. Violence was applied selectively, not as spectacle, but as enforcement. By the early 13th century, the map had changed, but more importantly, the logic of power had changed with it. Then, suddenly, the Ghurid Empire collapsed. Ghurid died. Muhammad of Ghor was assassinated in 1206. The central authority that had launched these conquests vanished almost overnight. This should have been the end. Instead, it was the beginning. Because the system remained in India, Ghurid commanders did not return west. They did not abandon their territories. They declared independence not from India, but from a dead center. Qutb Aibak crowned himself Sultan of Delhi. This moment is often treated as a rupture. In reality, it was continuity. The Delhi Sultanate did not emerge from chaos. It emerged from functioning institutions. The army remained intact. The revenue apparatus continued. The culture of delegated authority persisted. What made this state durable was not conquest, it was habit. Generations of soldiers, administrators, and elites adapted to the new order. Persian became the language of governance. Turkic military culture blended with Indian realities. Resistance did not disappear. Rebellions occurred. Dynasties changed, but the framework held. For the first time, a Muslim-ruled state with roots outside India became an Indian power, one that expected to exist indefinitely. This is the true legacy of the Ghurid conquests. Not the battles, not the names, but the introduction of a governing logic that could survive founder death, defeat, and succession crises. The Delhi Sultanate would later face the Mongols' internal revolts and economic strain. It would fracture and reform, but it would not dissolve back into pre-invasion patterns. That possibility had been closed. Because the Ghurids had answered a question no invader before them had solved: how to convert military penetration into administrative permanence. They did not conquer India by being stronger. They conquered it by being patient, by understanding that the real war was not against armies, but against time, and they won by refusing to lead. This is why the Delhi Sultanate was not an accident of history. It was the delayed outcome of choices made decades earlier, in mountain courts and battlefield revisions. Choices that favored systems over spectacle, delegation over domination, endurance over glory. And that is why, after the Ghurids, history did not reset. If you want to explore more stories where a single structural shift reshaped centuries, where outcomes felt inevitable only in hindsight, tell us which moment we should uncover next. And if this story held your attention, consider supporting the channel by liking the video and subscribing, because history does not move in highlights, it moves in decisions that refuse to be undone.